Professional sports are less about peak performance and more about how much administrative stupidity an athlete can endure. Some of these rules aren't just weird, they're proof of a collective mental breakdown by officials. From sanctioned assault to literal rat poison, we're dissecting 48 mandates that defy all logic. If you still believe sports are governed by experts, prepare to be corrected. 1. When James Naismith first invented basketball, he used actual peach baskets as hoops. But he forgot one crucial detail. He didn't cut the bottoms out. This meant that every single time someone scored, the entire game had to stop so a janitor could climb a ladder and retrieve the ball. The reward for a brilliant offensive play was a long, awkward timeout for everyone involved. It took several years of ladder climbing before someone finally had the revolutionary idea that a hole in the basket might actually make the game move faster. 2. In the NHL, throwing punches is technically a crime that earns you a 5-minute timeout. But here's the bizarre part. The referees are actually trained to let the chaos happen. Instead of intervening, these officials stand back and act as a polite security detail, watching two grown men pummel each other until one drops from exhaustion or a broken nose. It is the only major professional sport where an illegal assault is a scheduled, refereed, and highly anticipated part of the entertainment package. 3. NASCAR once required drivers to finish with the exact car they started in, leading to the bizarre sight of athletes pushing smoldering wreckage across the line on foot. In 1982, Tim Richmond literally collapsed from exhaustion trying to shove his fuel-starved car to the end. Before they fixed the rules, the world's most high-tech motorsport occasionally devolved into a primitive test of who could manhandle 2 tons of junk metal the furthest. It was less about aerodynamics and more about pure, desperate manual labor. 4. Hurdling is a sport about clearing obstacles, yet the penalty for actually hitting them is almost non-existent. You can legally demolish every single barrier on your way to the finish line, provided you don't do it on purpose. You'll lose speed and probably a lot of skin, but as long as you stay in your lane, you're golden. It's the only race where the winner isn't necessarily the most graceful jumper, but the person most efficient at acting like a high-speed human wrecking ball. 5. The New York Yankees are sports icons, but they've spent 50 years governed by a grooming code that feels like a 1950s boarding school. No player is allowed any facial hair except for a mustache. This forces superstars making $40 million a year to shave off their beards just to suit the whims of a long-dead owner who equated facial hair with a lack of discipline. The result? Some of the toughest men on earth end up looking like they're about to write you a ticket for a noisy muffler. 6. The 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis was less of a race and more of a cruelty experiment. The organizers provided only 2 water stations for the entire 26-mile course in 90-degree heat because they wanted to test the effects of purposeful dehydration. One runner nearly died from inhaling dust, another was chased off course by feral dogs, and the winner was physically carried across the line while hallucinating on rat poison. It remains the most disastrously regulated event in history, proving that experimenting on athletes is a fast track to a medical catastrophe. 7. The NFL employs what players call the sock police to enforce an incredibly petty uniform code. The league mandates the exact height a player's socks must reach. If a half-inch of skin shows between the sock and the pants, the player gets slapped with a massive fine. In a league defined by bone-crunching hits and gladiatorial combat, it's hilarious that the front office spends thousands of dollars ensuring that no one's calves are accidentally visible to the viewing public. 8. Tug-of-war was once an Olympic staple, but the rules were so poorly defined they bordered on comedy. At the 1904 Games, one team showed up in heavy work boots with massive steel cleats, while their opponents wore regular shoes. Predictably, the cleated team just anchored themselves into the dirt and won without moving an inch. Instead of banning the obvious advantage, officials just let it slide. The sport vanished from the Olympics shortly after, leaving a legacy defined by whoever had the scariest footwear. 9. In the sacred ring of sumo wrestling, known as the doyo, women are strictly forbidden from entering due to ancient beliefs regarding purity. This rule hit peak absurdity in 2018 when a female medic rushed into the ring to perform life-saving CPR on a politician who had collapsed. Rather than thanking her, the referee repeatedly ordered her to leave the ring over the loudspeaker while she was literally saving a man's life. It was a moment where ancient tradition collided with common sense, and common sense lost. 10. Boxing has a logical safety rule. If you score a knockdown, you must go to a neutral corner so the referee can count. In reality, this rule is treated as a polite suggestion. Iconic fighters like Muhammad Ali would famously stand directly over their dazed opponents, screaming insults while the ref stood by helplessly. By failing to enforce the neutral corner, officials essentially allowed the sport's safety procedures to be hijacked for the sake of high-intensity psychological warfare and legendary TV moments. 11. Competitive swimming once had an invisible swimmer problem. Breaststroke rules allowed athletes to stay submerged for almost the entire race to take advantage of deep water speed. For spectators, it was a disaster. They spent 50 seconds staring at an empty pool before heads finally popped up at the finish line. Officials eventually mandated that a swimmer's head must break the surface with every stroke, primarily because watching a race with no visible competitors is the opposite of entertainment. 12. Thomas Hicks won the 1904 Olympic marathon while being chemically poisoned by his own trainers. When he faltered, they fed him a cocktail of brandy, raw egg whites, and strychnine, better known as rat poison. In small doses, it acts as a stimulant. In larger ones, it's lethal. Hicks spent the final miles in a hallucinogenic haze and had to be medically revived immediately after crossing the line. He kept the gold, proving that in the early Olympics, nearly dying was just a daring training strategy. 13. Baseball grants umpires a weird superpower, the ability to predict a fictional future. When a fan interferes with a ball, the ref decides what would have happened without that interference. This led to the 1996 Jeffrey Mayer disaster, where a kid reached over the wall and stole a ball that was about to be caught. Instead of an out, the ref called it a home run, changing the entire playoffs. It's a rule that lets one official invent a fake reality because a spectator couldn't keep his hands to himself. 14. To level the playing field, professional badminton introduced a service rule that is a nightmare for tall people. Rather than serving from the waist, every player must now strike the shuttlecock from a fixed height of exactly 1.15 meters. This forces 6'5" giants to awkwardly crouch down like they're trying to fit into a dollhouse just to serve at the same level as a 5'2" opponent. In a quest for perfect equality, they turned the sport's opening move into a grueling test of mid-thigh flexibility. 15. From 1984 to 1992, solo synchronized swimming was an actual Olympic event. Let that sink in. The very concept of synchronization requires at least two things moving in unison, yet here was a single person performing alone. To this day, no one knows who they were supposed to be in sync with: the music, the water, their own heartbeat. It's a literal oxymoron that reached the pinnacle of sports, proving that if you're graceful enough, the Olympic Committee will ignore basic linguistics. 16. For decades, the Olympics featured rope climbing, which was basically a middle school fitness test with a high-stakes twist. Athletes hauled themselves up a 50-foot rope using only their arms, but the real absurdity was that they were also judged on style. Imagine the physical agony of pulling your entire body weight toward the ceiling while trying to look elegant and poised for a panel of judges. It was a brutal mix of elite strength training and a desperate, graceful struggle to avoid a massive drop. 17. The golf rulebook has a dedicated section for outside agencies, specifically when animals interfere with the game. If you hit a perfect shot and a squirrel decides your ball is a giant nut and buries it, you aren't penalized. You are legally allowed to replace the ball exactly where the crime occurred. It's comforting that the USGA has a formal contingency plan for rodent-based theft, even if the rules are silent on whether you can press charges against the squirrel for grand theft titleist. 18. In professional darts, you can throw a technically perfect shot that hits the highest scoring spot on the board and still walk away with nothing. If the dart doesn't stay embedded and falls to the floor, it's worth 0 points. There are no do-overs for bounce-outs. This means a moment of surgical accuracy can be completely erased by a worn-out board or simple bad luck. It's a rule that punishes perfection simply because the equipment wasn't sticky enough to cooperate with your talent. 19. Competitive skiing once included ski ballet, which was essentially figure skating on a mountain. Competitors in neon, sequined outfits performed choreographed spins and flips to music while sliding down a gentle slope. It was even an Olympic demonstration sport in the late 80s and early 90s. The discipline has since vanished, leaving behind only grainy footage of a time when the athletic world collectively wondered what would happen if a downhill skier and a ballerina had a very confusing, glittery fever dream. 20. The Cotswold Olympic Games feature a world championship for shin kicking, which is exactly as intellectual as it sounds. Two men grab each other's collars and kick each other's shins with maximum force until someone hits the dirt. To add a professional edge, competitors are legally allowed to stuff their trousers with straw for padding. It's a combat sport where the only requirements are a massive pain threshold, a total disregard for your shins, and a nearby haystack for safety equipment. 21. In the tradition-steeped world of sumo, the most humiliating way to lose isn't a throw, it's a wardrobe malfunction. A wrestler's only attire is a silk loincloth called a mawashi. If that garment comes completely undone during a bout, revealing more than the audience bargained for, the wrestler is instantly disqualified. Imagine training your entire life for a championship only to lose because your pants decided to resign mid-match. It's the ultimate walk of shame, where a loose knot can turn a legendary titan into a viral incident. 22. For decades, European soccer used the away goals rule, a system so convoluted it turned high-stakes matches into frantic math exams. The logic was that scoring on the road was harder, so if the total score was tied after 2 games, the team with more road goals advanced. This led to nonsensical scenarios where winning 1-0 at home was actually worse than losing 2-1 away. Eventually, officials realized that fans wanted to watch sports, not mental geometry, and they finally killed the rule in 2021 to save everyone's sanity. 23. Fencing once had a rule that was essentially a ban on basic survival instincts. It was illegal to cover your valid target area with your non-weapon hand. While it sounds sporting on paper, it meant that your natural biological impulse to flinch or block a sharp metal sword from piercing your chest was a punishable offense. You were literally required by law to let someone stab you rather than use your free arm for protection. It's the only sport that penalizes you for the crime of not wanting to be punctured. 24. For years, ski jumpers flew with their skis perfectly parallel because it looked elegant. In the late 80s, Jan Boklov tried a V-shape, which looked messy and earned him terrible style points from grumpy judges. The problem? He was landing way past everyone else. The V-style was aerodynamically superior, but the establishment hated it because it wasn't traditional. They spent years penalizing the literal future of the sport simply because it didn't fit their narrow, old-fashioned aesthetic of how a human being should look while flying. 25. Before 1992, soccer had a loophole so massive it nearly killed the sport's entertainment value. A defender could simply pass the ball back to their goalkeeper, who could pick it up and hold it indefinitely. If a team was up by a goal, they could legally refuse to play soccer for the rest of the game, just playing catch with their keeper until the clock ran out. It was excruciatingly boring. The back pass rule finally forced goalies to use their feet, saving the world from the most legal time-wasting tactic ever devised. 26. In 1977, an inventor debuted the spaghetti racket, a double-strung monstrosity that gave tennis balls a physics-defying, cartoonish spin. Suddenly, average Joes were annihilating world-class pros. The tennis elite panicked. Rather than letting the game evolve, They banned the technology within a single year. It was the equipment equivalent of nerfing a character in a video game because he was too overpowered. They didn't want a better racket. They wanted their traditional, predictable sport back, and they were willing to kill innovation to keep it. 27. Water polo is a game of two halves, the part the referee sees, and the brutal fight club happening underwater. The official rules basically stop at the surface. Below the water, players engage in a chaotic symphony of kicking, pulling, and holding that would get you arrested in any other setting. It's a hilarious contrast. Above water, it looks like a civilized Olympic team sport. Below water, it's a desperate aquatic wrestling match where anything goes as long as you don't create too many bubbles. 28. The Tour de France once featured the Lanterne Rouge, an unofficial prize for the last-place finisher. Far from being a mark of shame, it was a marketing goldmine, leading to more media fame and appearance fees. This created a race to the bottom, where cyclists would hide behind barns or fake mechanical issues just to lose time. They were literally competing to be the slowest men on two wheels. It turned the world's most grueling race into a strategic game of who could fail the most effectively. 29. The NFL earned the No Fun League moniker for its petty rule against helmet removal. Taking your helmet off to celebrate a touchdown, even a game-winning one, triggered an immediate 15-yard penalty. Imagine achieving a lifelong dream in front of 80,000 people and being fined because you wanted to show your face in a moment of triumph. The league argued it was about sportsmanship, but everyone else saw it for what it was: a joyless regulation designed to punish human emotion in a game built on passion. 30. Glima is a traditional Nordic wrestling style with a rule that sounds like it belongs in a Victorian finishing school. Competitors must stay upright, but the real kicker is the etiquette. You are required to look over your opponent's shoulder at all times. Looking down at their feet or legs to see what they're doing is considered dirty and trickery. It is a combat sport governed by a mandatory no-peeking policy, turning a physical struggle into a very intimate, high-stakes staring contest. 31. Fred Lors is the ultimate Olympic villain. During the 1904 marathon, he dropped out after 9 miles, hitched a ride in a car for 11 more, and then casually jogged the final stretch to claim the gold medal. When he was caught, he claimed the whole thing was just a practical joke. He was initially banned for life, but in a display of peak incompetence, the officials lifted the ban just a year later. He went on to win the Boston Marathon legally, proving that sometimes being a world-class troll actually pays off. 32. For 9 years, the NCAA actually banned the slam dunk. From 1967 to 1976, college basketball's most exciting play was illegal, largely because of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was so unstoppable that the league decided the only way to save the game was to outlaw his favorite shot. They claimed it was about injury prevention, but everyone knew the truth. It was the Alcindor rule, a desperate attempt to nerf a superstar whose sheer talent was breaking the game's competitive balance. 33. In the early days of hockey, goalies were forbidden from dropping to the ice to make a save. The rulebook mandated they remain standing, treating the position like a test of Victorian posture rather than a defense. Dropping to your knees to block a puck was actually penalized as ungentlemanly conduct. Eventually, officials realized that asking a man to block frozen rubber missiles while standing perfectly upright was a great way to get a goalie killed, and the rule was thankfully scrapped by the 1910s. 34. Sometimes the dumbest rule isn't written in a book. It's a desperate improvised call during a glitch in reality. In 2001, Hall of Fame pitcher Randy Johnson unleashed a 100-mile-per-hour fastball just as a mourning dove flew directly into the line of fire. The bird didn't just die, it literally disintegrated into a cloud of feathers. The official ruling? A no pitch. Despite a literal act of avian annihilation occurring in the middle of the strike zone, the game treated it like it never happened, because the rulebook simply wasn't prepared for nature's worst-timed flight. 35. For the first half-century of American football, the rules regarding safety were so primitive they bordered on a death wish. Players wore thin leather caps that offered the structural protection of a wet grocery bag. Even more insane was the total absence of face masks. For decades, the standard way to play a high-velocity collision sport was to leave your entire face completely exposed to flying knees and helmets. It wasn't a specific rule that was dumb. It was the catastrophic lack of a sane one that left generations of athletes looking like they'd survived a blender. 36. A demolition derby is a motorized celebration of pure vehicular carnage where the only goal is to be the last car standing. Yet, within this mechanical mosh pit, there is one surprisingly strict rule. You cannot intentionally hit another driver's side door. While it's a vital safety measure, it creates a beautiful irony. In a sport dedicated to total destruction, there's a gentleman's agreement to avoid the one specific spot that actually matters. It's like a gladiatorial arena, where you can use a mace, but poking someone's left shoulder is considered impolite. 37. Major soccer tournaments once tried the golden goal rule, thinking a sudden death finish would spark high-octane drama. The first team to score in extra time won instantly. It sounded thrilling, but the result was the exact opposite of excitement. Teams were so paralyzed by the fear of a single mistake ending their tournament that they simply stopped attacking altogether. Instead of glorious goals, fans got 30 minutes of nervous defenders passing the ball in circles, praying for a penalty shootout. It was a rule designed for heroics that systematically produced cowardice. 38. Baseball's balk rule is a masterpiece of incomprehensible nonsense. A balk occurs when a pitcher makes an illegal motion while runners are on base. But the problem is that almost no one, including the umpires, can explain what it actually is. The rulebook lists 13 different violations, ranging from foot placement to a subtle twitch of the shoulder. A pitcher can be standing perfectly still, blink the wrong way, and suddenly the umpire invokes a mysterious curse that allows every runner to advance. It's less of a sporting regulation and more of a psychic reading. 39. In 2014, Formula One introduced a rule so universally loathed it lasted exactly one season, double points for the final race. The winner of the season finale received 50 points instead of the usual 25. This meant a driver could dominate the entire year, winning almost every race, only to lose the World Championship because of one bad pit stop in November. Fans and drivers mocked it as a desperate, artificial gimmick to keep TV ratings up. The backlash was so immediate and overwhelming that F1 officials buried the rule in a shallow grave and never spoke of it again. 40. The wife-carrying World Championships is a real sport with a rulebook that sounds like a fever dream. Men race through an obstacle course while lugging a female teammate. But there's a catch. The wife must weigh at least 49 kilograms. If she's lighter than that, she has to be saddled with a weighted rucksack to make up the difference. It's a rule meant to ensure fairness in an activity that is inherently absurd, making sure no one gets an unfair advantage in the high-stakes art of sprinting through mud with a human being on their back. 41. Chess has a rule that serves as the ultimate participation trophy for the losing side, the stalemate. This happens when a player isn't in check but has no legal moves left. You'd think trapping your opponent so thoroughly they can't even twitch would mean you win. Nope. In the world of chess, that's a draw. You can be one move away from total victory, but if you accidentally corner the enemy king without directly attacking him, the game is over, and nobody wins. It's the ultimate punishment for being too dominant and not careful enough. 42. Race walking is an Olympic spectacle governed by one truly ridiculous mandate. You must always appear to have one foot touching the ground, and your advancing leg must be locked straight. This forces elite athletes to adopt a frantic, hip-swinging waddle that looks like someone desperately trying to reach a bathroom before an accident. Judges literally hover over their feet, ready to disqualify anyone for the sin of actually running. It's essentially a high-speed contest where the main goal is to move fast while pretending you're just out for a stroll. 43. Early bare-knuckle boxing was a brutal endurance test with rules designed for maximum damage. A round didn't have a time limit. It only ended when a fighter was knocked or thrown to the ground. After a knockdown, the fighter had 30 seconds to stumble back to the center of the ring, or the fight was over. This is how matches stretched to 75 or even 100 rounds. It wasn't a contest of skill. It was a grim, endless cycle of getting pummeled, falling down, and getting back up until one person's body literally gave out. 44. At the 1900 Paris Games, the Olympics featured one of its darkest and shortest-lived events: live pigeon shooting. The goal was simple: kill as many birds as possible after they were released in front of the competitors. Over 300 birds were slaughtered in a single afternoon, leaving the field a grisly mess of feathers and wounded animals. The winner took home a gold medal, and the grounds crew took home a lifetime of trauma. Unsurprisingly, this particular brand of organized cruelty was immediately scrapped and remains a stain on Olympic history. 45. In 1983, George Brett hit a legendary game-winning home run for the Kansas City Royals. However, the opposing manager noticed a bizarre rule. Pine tar for grip couldn't extend more than 18 inches up the bat. The umpire measured the bat, found the tar was 24 inches high, and actually nullified the home run, ending the game on the spot. Brett's subsequent meltdown is the stuff of sports legend. It was a historic moment of athletic brilliance erased by a rule that felt more like a middle school art project regulation than a professional sports law. 46. Every year in England, people gather for the Cooper's Hill cheese rolling, a sport where the only real rule is try not to die. A 9-pound wheel of cheese is rolled down a near-vertical, uneven hill, and hundreds of people throw themselves after it. Gravity ensures that almost no one stays on their feet, turning the event into a high-speed tumble of broken bones and concussions. The first person to cross the finish line at the bottom wins the cheese. The dumbest rule here is the existence of the event itself. A race where the prize is a snack and the cost is your skeletal integrity. 47. Professional bowling is a game of incredible precision, but its foul line rule is mercilessly absolute. You can deliver a flawless strike, but if the tip of your shoe slides even a single millimeter over that line, your score is an immediate 0. There is no umpire's discretion and no close enough. In a sport that allows for colorful shirts and personal flair, there is a literal line in the sand that will erase your greatest triumphs if your brakes are just a tiny bit worn out. It's perfectionism enforced by a censor. By 48. The first modern Olympic swimming events in 1896 were less of a competition and more of a maritime disaster. The 1,200-meter freestyle wasn't held in a pool. Instead, swimmers were taken out by boat into the freezing 55-degree Mediterranean Sea and told to swim back to shore through 12-foot waves. The winner later admitted his only motivation wasn't the gold medal, but an overpowering urge to survive. It remains the only time in history that an Olympic gold was awarded to the person who was simply the most successful at not drowning in the open ocean. 48 reasons why sports history is basically a fever dream. We've seen everything from the fashion police to actual rat poison. Now, I want your take. Which specific rule or law in sports do you find completely incomprehensible and think should be erased from existence right now? Tell us why in the comments. If you're smart enough to spot the stupidity, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's weirdest stories.